All right, so I told you guys that I would keep you updated on the unfolding situation down in Haiti in the wake of the assassination of their president, and we do have some pretty big new information that is coming out. And there are two different paths that I want to take in analyzing this situation, because on the one hand, you have this unfolding investigation into who was responsible for the assassination, and it can get pretty difficult to dissect these things, especially when some of the only sources that we have on who was responsible for this is coming straight from the extremely corrupt Haitian government officials and the U.S. State Department, who are typically not to be trusted on matters like this, at least not at face value. So I'm gonna wait until I analyze and give my analysis on who is actually responsible for the assassination. As of what we know right now, it seems like there was at least some degree of U.S. involvement. We have Colombian former military personnel who had U.S. training. We have former DEA and FBI informants who were involved in this plot, as well as a company that was based down in Florida involved in this plot. So it's a really complex situation there as to who is responsible for the assassination. Now, let's get into the actual on the table, important in the immediate sense, situation of U.S. involvement in the installation of a new government in Haiti. And this is what I really want to focus on, because I think this is the more pertinent piece of this story that is continuing to unfold. And, some of the biggest fears that we had as American leftists in regards to American intervention in Haiti in this moment seem to be coming true. So Haiti, urged by foreign powers, announces new government. So this should be setting alarm bells off immediately, right? Haiti, urged by foreign powers, announces new government. Why the fuck would foreign powers have anything to do with the domestic policies of Haiti and a government that should be forming in the name of the Haitian people and in a democratic way? Why are foreign powers deciding how this process is going to unfold? So that's really the alarm bells that I've been getting from this. So Claude Joseph was the country's leader in the aftermath of President Jovenel Moise's assassination. He will now hand power to Ariel Henry and join a new unity government intended to keep Haiti stable. So some important context in this situation is that Jovenel Moise, the president who was assassinated, there were massive protests for him against him in Haiti that were unfolding in the months prior to his assassination. So there was already extreme unrest among the people of Haiti. They were obviously fed up with this corrupt government that was really a U.S.-backed puppet dictatorship. Jovenel Moise, a lot of the problems that they are facing right now, which were facing right now in response to the assassination, a lot of those problems come from the fact that Jovenel Moise was a dictator, and he was essentially ruling by decree. And so a lot of these democratic institutions that Haiti had were being completely dismantled by this U.S.-backed dictator. And so it doesn't really make any sense to me why they would go with this nominee, this Ariel Henry guy, as well as this Claude Joseph guy, who were both extensions of that puppet dictatorship, and therefore would have no real legitimacy from the point of view of the Haitian people. So here we go. So let's dissect this a little bit. So I'm going to jump down here to give you a little bit more of this, the perspective from the situation on the ground. So the political standoff in the wake of the assassinations was made all the more complicated by the fact that many of the nation's democratic institutions had been hollowed out during Mr. Moise's time in office. Only 10 sitting senators remained out of 30 because the terms of the other 20 had expired and elections were not held to replace them. The lower house is entirely vacant. Its members' terms expired last year, leaving Mr. Moise to govern by decree for more than a year before he was killed. And beyond that, the head of Haiti's highest court died of COVID-19 in June, depriving the country of yet another means of deciding who should govern next. So this is, again, part of the problem when you have a U.S.-backed puppet dictator who is not serving the interests of the people of Haiti and is unwinding or unraveling a lot of their institutions. I mean, when a majority of your Senate is not holding office because you haven't held elections, because you're a dictator ruling by decree, that's obviously going to leave a massive power vacuum and an even worse problem when you're assassinated. So that's the situation that's making it even more difficult to follow this succession of power. And so here, who's going to step in to save the day? Well, apparently it's this core group of powerful foreign governments and international organizations that exercise great influence in Haiti, including the United Nations, the Organization of American States, which if you've been following my coverage on Bolivia, then you would know that the Organization of American States has facilitated far-right fascist coup attempts against leftist government in history. So they are not a source to be trusted on the formations of new democratic governments in any of these countries. So the Organization of American States, the European Union, the United States, France, Spain, Canada, Germany, and Brazil, bill called on Saturday for the formation of a consensual and inclusive government, and to this end, the group said it strongly encourages the Prime Minister-designate Ariel Henry to continue the mission entrusted to him to form such a new government. So obviously none of those sources that we just listed, France, the United States, especially given our even recent imperialist involvement in Haiti, should be trusted as new sources to form this government, right? Even if you just take very recent history, the United States alone, under the George W. Bush Sr. and George W. Bush Jr. administrations, both of them were involved in coup attempts against the governments of Haiti, the democratically elected governments of Haiti. So we literally, and if you look at the history of this, the core group was set up in 2004 after a coup as part of the UN stabilization mission, said Jake Johnson, a research associate for the Center for Economic and Policy Research in Washington. Since then, he said, it has become a de facto fourth branch of government, and the core group's role in reshuffling of Haiti's government came as a slap in the face to the commission, a gathering of civil rights society groups and political parties with more than 150 members who held marathon meetings over the weekend to publicly work out the kind of transitional government they wanted. And then, so I mean, you really get the sense that this core group was set up in the aftermath of a coup attempt against the democratically elected government of Haiti, and this core group does not have the best interests of the Haitian people at heart, obviously. It's a core group that is set up by all of these different imperialist interests that have none of the actual interests of the Haitian people at heart. So, it's a really fucked up situation that's happening right now with this core group that is stepping in as if they have the authority, as if they have the right to determine what's going to happen in the formation of this new government. It's really just, this is we're witnessing in real time the installation of another form of government in Haiti that is going to be used to the interests of the U.S. State Department instead of to the interests of the Haitian people and their resources and how they actually want to form their coalition government. And if you want to see just how bold some of the U.S. State Department spokespeople are. This is a U.S. State Department spokesperson, Ned Price, who is really just completely arrogant in his mindset here of how, the United States should somehow be deciding the democratic will of the Haitian people. So let's go ahead and hear what he had to say on this.
The side of the Haitian people. We're taking the side of
the side of the guy who was named but hadn't taken office.
We are taking the side of the Haitian people. This is a dialogue that has been ongoing between various Haitian political stakeholders.
Whether you want to admit it or not, there was a shift in what you had been saying prior to that statement. You were all in support of the acting prime minister, and then all of a sudden on Saturday, you and the other members of the core group came out in support of Mr. Henry.
Matt, we are supporting the inclusive dialogue that Haiti's political actors are undertaking themselves.
Okay, so, literally, look at how arrogant he actually is in that clip. Saying he speaks for the Haitian people, the U.S. State Department speaks for the Haitian people, we're just doing what's in the best interest of the Haitian people. It's complete horseshit. You don't have to look that far. Again, we were just involved within the last 20 years in multiple coup attempts against their democratically elected leaders. So it's complete bullshit to suggest that the United States or any of these other imperialist groups or organizations could possibly have the best interests of the Haitian people in their minds as they are forming this new coalition government. So this is really important that we center a spotlight on this, because how this is going to unfold, how this power vacuum is going to be filled, really matters to all of the people who live in Haiti and don't want to have another U.S. puppet dictator installed who is going to, give deference to U.S. corporate interests to exploit the resources and labor force in Haiti. So this is a big problem that we have going on right now, and really feel for the Haitian people and hope that they can actually form some sort of new coalition government that does represent the people of Haiti and that they can move forward with actual democratic elections. But in order for any of that to happen, you're going to actually need to boot out the United States. You're going to need to remove these imperialist interests because they are not going to do anything other than install a new puppet dictator who is going to serve our interests instead of the interests of the Haitian people.